Philly Debatable, the show that debates the Philly sports topics you're discussing.
Philly Debatable, episode number, I have no idea. It is July 21st, though. It is a Friday, which we are recording this. A new episode of Philly Debatable and a new guest as well. My name is Jon Jansen. Usually this is Sean Brace hosting the show, and he'll throw it to me, saying his lovely co-host, the ones who win every debate, Jon Jansen. But instead, I have to go to a guy that's maybe too smart to be on the show debating something with me. It is Roy Burton at the BS Line on Twitter. Roy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm glad the folks at the Fox the Gambler made the call to the bullpen to bring me in because I was tired of you beating Brace all the time. So it's nice for them to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I win every single one of these. Now I have some competition though, so it's going to be interesting. Let's get into number one, the Phillies lineup problems over the past couple of days. So simple enough, is the Phillies lineup good enough this season to compete for an NL crown? Your thoughts on the Phillies lineup, which has kind of struggled. And when they do struggle, it looks very bad.
It has kind of struggled, but again, like as of this recording, the Phillies are still in the playoff mix. They're tied for Miami with that last wild card spot. And John, as we saw last year, all you need is a ticket to the dance. Once you have a ticket to the dance, anything can happen. And right now, the Phillies have a ticket. They're 52-44 right now. They had a bad series against the Brewers, an awful game 3 against the Brewers. They got, like 5 guys on base against the Brewers. So the lineup has been struggling a little bit. But you look at the numbers, they're 8th in the league in batting average. They're still better than league average in terms of OPS and on-base percentage. So I think the lineup is good enough to compete for a crown. I mean, obviously, we have the issues, the ongoing debate of whether or not Kyle Schwarber should be your leadoff hitter, and we could talk about that later if you want. But I think they have a good enough team to compete for the NL crown with the lineup they have now.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue with that. I feel like to me, when I see it on paper, yeah, it looks great. Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Shitu Realmuto, even, going into the bottom of the lineup with Bryson Stott. I don't even care what order you put them in. I just know that Bryson Stott hitting 6th is hitting very well. And Kyle Schwarber leading off is hitting very well in the leadoff spot. But I think with Trey Turner and Bryce Harper, this just might be what they are this season. Not to say who they are for the rest of their careers, but every season is different. No one singular season is the same as the next. Every season changes from year to year, especially with Trey Turner, who's coming into a new organization, and with Bryce Harper, who is coming off of major elbow surgery. So this is just what it is. So I feel like on paper, and having that optimism that you just get into the playoffs and you never know what happens. And you're right. That optimism, I think, is fair. But to me, I think that they might be lacking a little bit too much on offense just because of what this season, what they came into with it. Trey Turner, Bryce Harper just aren't going to be their best years. But that's where the trade deadline comes in. I guess to me it's a work in progress. There still is work to be done. I think there is another bat that they're going to need to bring in. I think one of those bats could be Cody Bellinger, who fits the first base and outfield, corner outfield positions, which they desperately need. But then also you have a big lefty bat who's hitting 894 OPS this season. So look, not to say it has to be Cody Bellinger or bust, or it could be better or worse than that. I'm just thinking there does need to be some kind of work done to this lineup, because as it is now, I'm just not sure you're going to get the seasons you need out of Harper and Turner to be competing for what we hope is an NL crown and back into the World Series and a World Series win. The pitching is there, but I'm starting to question whether or not that lineup will get there this season.
No, and that's a good point, because again, like you assume that Trey Turner was going to be your leadoff hitter, or at least I did coming into the season, and obviously he hasn't been that guy. And you're kind of stuck with Kyle Schwarber, who's hitting basically nothing but solo home runs. Like, you would like the guy who has 26 home runs to have more than 18 solo home runs, but again, that's the path we've chosen as far as him at your leadoff hitter. So maybe you move Bryce, either if you don't do the Bellinger move, you move Bryce Harper to first base. You let Schwarber be your leadoff hitter, and maybe you get a more competent everyday outfielder who will be a better corner outfielder defensively, and may be able to get base more often than a guy like a Trey Turner. So you can put him at the top of the lineup. But yeah, again, I think all you need is a ticket. Even if you don't do anything at the trade deadline, I would have to imagine that Trey Turner is going to I don't want to say turn it around completely, but give you more than I think the 300 on base percentage is giving you
I
this
think you would
year.
have a better chance of Bryce Harper getting better just because it's just getting healthier and comfortable with his elbow.
Right. And I think Harper's batting 300 anyway. So he's getting on base. Like the power's not there, but he's getting on base. He's making things work in the lineup. So I would hope that, once hitting season starts, kind of coming around in like next month, and maybe these guys kind of turn it up a little bit and give you a little bit more on offense.
It's always funny when I talk about Bryce Harper in that way because he's just not hitting home runs. His extra base hit power isn't necessarily there like it was. And I feel like just the home runs are the glaring spot because the Phillies really need some home runs now that they'll have Rhys Hoskins. And Bryce Harper is usually want to give them that. But the guy is over an 800 OPS and he's hitting 300 as an average. So his definition of struggling is a lot different than everyone else. That's certainly true. All right, moving on to the next one. Let's keep it to the Eagles. And there was a list that came out. Execs, coaches, GMs, scouts, all of them. ESPN is polling them, putting out lists. So are you okay with Jalen Hurts as the 6th best quarterback according to these coaches, execs, and GMs? This was posted on ESPN.
So the ESPN list has Jalen Hurts 6th behind Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, and Justin Herbert. Now, I'm not going to argue the Mahomes, the Allen, and the Burrow. I'm not going to do that. And I'll even give the ESPN execs a pass, or the NFL execs a pass for Aaron Rodgers, because it's obviously for pass play and not what we saw last year in Green Bay. But the last time that any of us watched an NFL football game, Jalen Hurts threw for 300 yards in the Super Bowl, ran for 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, and was basically the MVP of the league before he got hurt. He was 16-2 last year as a starter. With those numbers and with that performance in the Super Bowl, there is no way I can put Jalen Hurts behind Justin Herbert, who hasn't won a single playoff game in his career. This is like, I understand if they thought that this was a what quarterback would you want for the next 10 or 15 years kind of list, but that wasn't how the question was phrased. It was, who is the best quarterback heading into the 2023 season? I think by far and away it's Jalen Hurts over Justin Herbert. I don't even think it's necessarily that close. To have him, Justin Herbert, over Jalen Hurts at this point is it's insane. It's insane to me.
Yeah, I think it is just based off because Jalen Hurts has done it. Jalen Hurts has proven, hey, here's my worth, here's my value, and here's how high I can go. And still, I think we're trying to figure that out with Justin Herbert. He can get there, and I think he can with Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator. But I think you're right. See, to me, get Aaron Rodgers away from there. Get Aaron Rodgers completely out of the discussion. There's this tier of quarterbacks that I look at, behind, you mentioned obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. I think they are, obviously Patrick Mahomes is well above everybody else, but they're sort of in the tier of their own. I feel like that next tier is Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson. Those should be the next 4 on that list. And I'm at this point where, to me, I think the talent is all very close. There's so many different types of circumstances they are in, different parts of their career that they are in. Trevor Lawrence just got done his 2nd season, had the best jump from year 1 to year 2. So I feel like Trevor Lawrence, we haven't seen him yet in his 3rd year like we have with some of these other quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts, we've seen him prove it, so he's the one I think who should be put at least at the top of this list for right now, and maybe even for the future, because we have seen it. He's done it for an MVP, close to an MVP, and then he's also gone to a Super Bowl and basically played like a Super Bowl MVP. So yeah, I think Hurts should be 4, but again, I don't feel like it's too far away. If I were to list it right now, I probably have Hurts, Lawrence, Herbert, and Lamar. Lamar is only health. If Lamar was healthy, I would actually have him as like the number 2. I still think he's like the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in the league.
Really?
Yes, I still do. Circumstances mean everything. And he hasn't had the offense. He hasn't had, Greg Roman wasn't a good offensive coordinator. He was a very pedestrian offense, and they haven't had any receivers. This, to me, feels like the first legit offense Lamar Jackson has ever had in his career, and he's already won an MVP without a legit offense. So it's just health me for him, but still, health is enough of a concern that I think for now we can put him below those guys, but easily jump back up. But I've seen this arguing, and I guess I brought this up again because I see the arguing of why do you have Herbert and Lawrence so high? Why is Lamar Jackson too low? Why is Jalen? Look, all of these guys to me, they're very close, and for at least now, Hurts is the one that has proved it the most, that has had the playoff success, that has won in the regular season, that was running up for MVP. I know Lamar has the MVP. He doesn't have the playoff success. Hurts has it all right now that I think you would have to list him at 4 above those guys. But again, I just feel like that tier is so close. They are all very talented quarterbacks.
Yeah. I would probably have, on my personal list, I'd probably have Mahomes and then probably Burrow as 2. And I'd probably have Hurts now and probably 3 and 3A on that next year. But again,
Over Josh Allen, okay, actually agree with that. I think Josh Allen might be a slight overrated.
Yeah. But I mean, like the Lamar Jacksons and those guys, the Trevor Lawrences and the Justin Herberts, they're right there. I mean, they're all really good quarterbacks. Like at that point, we're almost splitting hairs with that. But again, if you're saying who is the best quarterback heading into the 2023 season, it's Jalen Hurts. And this isn't, I mean, even if you're looking at a future thing, Jalen Hurts is 7 months younger than Justin Herbert. So if you want to say who is the next, quarterback that you want on your team for the next 10 years, Jalen Hurts is the younger guy, and we've seen him do it in the playoffs. So why not even pick Jalen Hurts if that was a criteria? So I'm a little confused at those guys, especially the one executive who ranked Jalen Hurts at 10. I don't know where you get off doing that. That's unbelievable.
Look, I used to be the biggest Jalen Hurts hater, and like I can't even do it anymore. I've converted.
Can't do it.
I think everybody else can. You know what? I think if I could make a bold prediction of where Jalen Hurts could be by the end of the season, and also how I would look at this list, I think you're right. I think we're seeing step backs, slight step backs, but enough that Josh Allen, I think, is just going to continue to slightly regress more and more each season. I think by the end of the season, you could have a top 4 list where I think you could have, obviously, Patrick Mahomes is always going to be number 1, but I think Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence are going to make their names so heard this season. Like Jacksonville's going to have success. I think they're going to get a number. They could be close to a number 1 seed in the AFC. Your top 4 quarterbacks could be Mahomes, Burrow, Hurts, and Lawrence. And I think that is a league that is very much worth watching with those 4. But that's how much I think about Hurts at this point, and that's how much I think about Lawrence. But again, with Jalen Hurts at 6, I think any preconceived notions in the draft or what he was in the first 2 years, that all needs to go away. He's the one that's actually proved it, and I think he's the one who at least deserves to be in that spot over those other guys at the time being. I think Jalen Hurts at 6, a little bit too low. Speaking of low, and speaking of low on value, though, next question here on Philly Debatable with Roy Burton and myself, Jon Jansen. Do running backs have value or no value in the NFL?
So here's the thing, right? So we all know what the value positions are in the NFL. It's quarterback, it's left tackle, it's edge rushers, right? So teams are going to devote their resources to those premium positions, which again makes sense because you're in a salary cap league. You have a certain amount of resources. So those resources have to come from somewhere, and they are coming more and more from the running back position because you guys know, and everybody watching this knows, you can find running backs and not have to pay a lot for them and not have to use a lot of draft capital for running backs. There's a ton of day 3 running backs, undrafted running backs that are doing fine in the NFL. So you can easily replace the running back position and find value, those valuable running backs on a day 3 or undrafted, like a Pacheco, Jamal Williams, Alvin Kamara, those type of guys. You can find more than capable running backs and then use that money for those valuable positions. How you fix this, I don't know. There's a couple of different proposals out there on how to fix this. But again, you look around at the league. The league doesn't have those bell cow running backs that we all grew up with. The guys who would get the 30 carries a game, 400 carries a year. Those guys are gone. There were 8 running backs last year who averaged 16 or more carries a game. That's done. You're going to get every team is going to have the Eagles kind of running back room where you have 4 or 5 guys that you can lean on. None of those guys are going to average more than 14 carries a game this year, but they're going to be a quality running back room. They're going to give you, 1,500, 1,800 yards, and you're going to spend a lot less resources on that, which you can spend that money on a Hassan Reddick or a Jalen Hurts, as we saw this year, or an offensive lineman to keep those guys upright. So I don't know how you fix this with the running backs, but again, the running back position is far undervalued, and I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle at this point.
Yeah, I think it's undervalued. And to say the running backs have no value, I hate the way this is being talked about because this is a labor issue, right? Yeah. This is a labor issue to me. And now we're comparing it to other labor issues like AI with writing and the film industry. First of all, if you have anything to say about AI in this, just don't do it because AI is an absolute disgrace to humanity that should not be taking away jobs. But this is a little bit different because, yes, the workplace has changed, but so has the running back. But just because it's changed doesn't mean that teams are using running backs any less. There are running backs like Saquon Barkley who are amassing more touches in a season, doubling almost any top wide receiver. A top wide receiver gets 100 catches, 120 catches. Saquon Barkley's getting over 200 touches if you amount carries and also receiving touches. In his repertoire. So yes, they're doubling the amount that these running backs are doing compared to other skill position players. They're basically running them into the ground and then going, oh, well, you guys don't last long. Like, I wonder why they don't last long, because you use them constantly. And the bigger issue I have with this is, don't tell me the running backs aren't valuable, because I think the biggest problem I have with this debate is that, running backs, every running back is great and you can plug in any running back and they would have the same type of production. Well, yes, you're right. You can get an Isaiah Pacheco and you can get some other players that I think fill a need, but you're filling a need for a team that has Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback. The Giants in San Francisco, I want to look at with their running backs. Christian McCaffrey is the biggest reason why San Francisco is good. Don't tell me Brock Purdy was more valuable than Christian McCaffrey. Don't tell me Daniel Jones is more valuable than Saquon Barkley. The reason why Daniel Jones could be hidden by Brian Dable, could be used in a very regressed role than he was previously with the Giants, is because Saquon Barkley could take all of the heat. Saquon Barkley could catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run the ball. He can get them chunk yards, big plays, explosive plays. Remember the Giants last year? I think halfway through the season, they had more explosive running plays than passing plays. I think they were only one of the few NFL teams that could actually say that.
Yeah.
That, to me, tells me the value lies in the running back. And we've seen this over and over again. Quarterbacks work well off of play action. Well, who is the reason why play action works? It's the running back. To say running back doesn't have any value and the quarterbacks have all of the value, and skill position, wide receivers, it all works hand in hand. To just say solely that running backs don't have value and that wide receivers and quarterbacks are more important and you don't need running backs. Well, try telling that to teams, especially Tennessee, when they don't try and use play action with Derrick Henry. Does any defense give a bleep if you do a play action with a backup running back for Tennessee? No. And Ryan Tannehill is left out to the Wolves, and they don't have enough playmakers now that they let go of A.J. Brown. That Tennessee was an abject disaster last year, just a total failure last year. And I think a lot of that was because of it. So I think Tennessee, to me, and the New York Giants and San Francisco, those are great examples of running backs are more important than anybody else on that team and on that offense, and they need to be paid, but they're never going to, because teams just can say and fall back on, well, you don't last long. And I hate that.
Yeah, I hate that too. And I think, and again, like you said, this is a more labor issue. This is a more something that's probably going to have to be addressed in the next CBA down the road. But I think, and you raised a good point. I think the thing is with the running backs, like, you have to kind of evaluate them on the touches and not just the rushing, the rushing attempts. And so when you have a guy like Saquon Barkley who can catch the ball out of the backfield 40 or 50 times a year, I think you need to factor that in a little bit. I think, they need to adjust these franchise tag values or transition tag values to say, hey, this guy just doesn't run the ball. Like, he's basically a running back and, a half a receiver. Like, could you'll see like the guys like the Christian McCaffreys and, when he gets a new contract next year, Austin Eckler, I think those guys are going to get paid because they touch the ball, 280, 300 times a year. They're going to get 70 catches out of the backfield. I think those guys are going to get paid because I think people recognize that those guys are real dual threat guys. But I think just in general, I think running backs, especially running backs who catch the ball out of the backfield, I think they need to be valued more as running back / receivers.
I think
so. And then you can say, all right, maybe the running back number, the franchise number for running back, maybe it's not $10.1 million. Maybe it's 12.5 because again, he's partially a receiver as well. I think if you tweak that a little bit, I think maybe obviously the average values for running backs are going to increase. And I think teams will pay more attention to that position going forward.
Yeah, I think so. And that's where the change comes, because is the NFL changing and running backs, less and less being involved in the way that they were? Yes, but running backs have also evolved in the way tight ends have evolved. Tight ends have evolved into Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce. Running backs are evolving into Saquon Barkley's and Christian McCaffrey, who, by the way, McCaffrey was lining up out wide for San Francisco. There was a play that San Francisco used in the playoffs where Deebo Samuel was in the backfield and Christian McCaffrey was lined up out wide. If that's if running backs are adapting and if they adapt to what the new NFL is, then yes, they have value in this. And if teams can look at that and say, well, yes, this is what they have been for us, but this is what they are now, I think there is a reason to end up paying them more and that they are undervalued. So yeah, I'm tired of the labor discussions and how people are treating this. That's my 2 cents though. Moving on to the New York Jets, because Aaron Rodgers, they're doing some type of rookie camp or whatever, and Rodgers is throwing and he's being patient. I don't know, but all this talk about the New York Jets just keeps getting louder, and it's been getting louder recently as we get closer to training camp. So simple. Are the Jets a playoff team with Aaron Rodgers?
So, I was really ready to come on here and say, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Jets were a definite playoff team because, again, like you saw last year, they were 7-10, and they had awful quarterback play. I mean, you had Joe Flacco, you had Zach Wilson, you had Mike White. I mean, you had just a murderer's row of terrible quarterbacks, and now you have Aaron Rodgers, who you can argue is probably the best quarterback in Jets history, and he hasn't thrown a pass yet for the franchise. So you would think with that defense and Aaron Rodgers that, all right, you knock out 10 wins, you make the playoffs. John, I don't know if you looked at the schedule. The schedule's tough at the beginning, man. Like their schedule is rough. Like the first three of the first 4 games, you got the Bills, you got the Cowboys, and you got the Chiefs, and you have the Eagles and the Chargers, and that's all before Thanksgiving. I think they make the playoffs, but I think it's going to be thanks to a really light schedule in December. Like they're going to be one of those teams in the mix, like late, and then they'll just have to make a run in December to make it happen because in December they have the Falcons, the Texans, the Commanders, and the Browns. They should win probably all 4 of those games. So I think they'll make a late run, a late playoff push to make that happen. But I think the Jets are probably going to start like 1-3 or 2-4. Then you're going to see everything. Mike Greenberg is probably going to go crazy on Get Up every morning, saying like, "What's wrong with the Jets? What's wrong with Aaron Rodgers?" And he'll, heads will spin. But I think they'll get it together. But it's not going to be a cakewalk, definitely.
So I have been yes, and I think there is a good chance that they don't. So I'll go in that direction because the Jets are a playoff team, like a playoff roster, a playoff team, a playoff quarterback, playoff, offense, playoff defense. They have all of that. But I can say that probably, for the wild card, there's 3 spots. I could probably say that for 4 or 5 other teams that are be going for that wild card spot. So I think the wild card gets a little bit too crowded, and you're right that the schedule starts off a little bit tough. I know that they even play the Eagles as well. That's going to be a tough game. Yeah. Who knows how quickly they're going to be able to acclimate Aaron Rodgers. Now, the good thing is you do have a coach in Nathaniel Hackett that he's worked with, that he's familiar with, but still it's different. Tom Brady even had some bumps in the road in his first year at Tampa Bay. It ended up good, but it still took some time, and it's going to take some time with Aaron Rodgers. If it does and they slip up a little bit, that leaves room open for, and look, I think the teams right now that we can easily look at, the Chargers, Ravens, and Dolphins as those 3 teams that could be over the Jets. But then I even have to think you have to look at a team like the Cleveland Browns as well that could be in that discussion. So we're talking about not just 4 teams, but potentially 5 teams for those 3 spots. And if there is any slippage here, and if Aaron Rodgers and the Jets do start slow, then this playoff roster doesn't mean anything by the end of the season when they're winning all of these games, because the 1-3 start, or potentially, the 1-4 start to start the season, doesn't really matter because the Dolphins and all those teams are going to be good. Now, again, there's variance. The Dolphins, I think there are questions about health with Tua. And of course, we have some questions about, the Ravens and Lamar's health, all of that. But as of right now, it does seem like it's a little bit tougher, and it would lean more no than yes for me.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but again, I can't help but look at that defense that was dominant last year. And then you had basically the best 2 offensive rookies of the year last year. Like you had Brees Hall, who got hurt, who was going to be the offensive rookie of the year before he got injured. Garrett Wilson won it anyway. So you have, 2 really good young talents, and then you added an Alan Lazard, who's a kind of a safety blanket for Aaron Rodgers. You have a Mecole Hardman. Like you said, like this playoff, like the roster itself, like, just in a vacuum, the roster itself is a playoff caliber roster. They will have some bumps in the road, and it will be, kind of hard for them to kind of make things happen. But again, I just think that they're going to, at the end of the year, they have enough talent that, in December, you can win those games, or you should win those games against the Texans, who will have nothing to play for, the Falcons, who have nothing to play for, probably Washington has nothing to play for. And again, you can sneak in 10-7. I'm not sure if they'll do much in the playoffs, but I think they can be one of the top 3 wild cards in the AFC.
Well, Roy, I hate to say, but our time is coming to a close. But as we do at the end of Philly Debatable Show, 30 seconds, floor is yours.
All right. Well, I don't know if you saw, John, but Bruce Brown, NBA champion, went on the Title League podcast, and he said he wanted to go to Carolina when he was coming out of high school, but Carolina told him that instead of bringing him in, they were going to bring in Seventh Woods. Now, I don't know if you know Seventh Woods, but for those of you out there who are not familiar with Seventh Woods, I implore you to go to Google or YouTube and Google Seventh Woods mixtape. Now, for those of you who like basketball YouTube, compilations, Seventh Woods might have the best compilation I've ever seen. Like, this is a 14-year-old kid who was just dunking on guys. He was playing varsity basketball when he was 13. His YouTube high school clips from when he was a 14-year-old was one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. And I completely understand Carolina saying no to Bruce Brown, the 23rd overall guy in that class, and going with Seventh Woods, because Seventh Woods was a phenomenon. And I would take Seventh Woods on the Blue Coats today if you wanted to play down in Delaware. So Bruce Brown, you're a champion, be happy with that new contract. But Seventh Woods back then, that man was a problem. Well, that kid was a problem.
I like it. For me, my 30 seconds, change the damn name. Washington Commanders, new ownership, Josh Harris, Magic Johnson coming in. Look, I think in more than one way, I think it's beneficial. First of all, Washington Commanders is a terrible name. But two, you will be able to get rid of even more all of the past that you had with Daniel Snyder, which it's looking more and more as Snyder has to play the league $60 million because of an investigation, that Daniel Snyder is not somebody that you want to keep in your history. Erase everything that he had to do with, start fresh, start completely new. I think that's the way Washington can get rid of what was a really bad 25 years with their previous owner. But Roy, thank you for joining me. Where can they follow you and what can they find from you, Roy?
You can follow me on Twitter at the BS Line for all things sports and non-sports. But if you guys are fantasy focused, you can follow me as well at GT Decision. That's my fantasy hub, and you can check out gtdecision.net for all your NFL fantasy and NFL DFS news for the upcoming season. Got a lot of stuff planned for the next few weeks, next few months. So please check that out as well. You can subscribe to the Substack, and I appreciate it. Thanks, John.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, Fox Sports The Gambler. Follow us on Twitter at FoxPHL Gambler. My name is Jon Jansen. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Philly Debatable.